This podcast serves Middle Tennessee every weekday morning, and it's made possible by member support. Learn how you can make a difference at WPLN.org/support.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's September 11th, 2025. On this day in 1869, leaders of Nashville's Black community held a meeting to discuss the possibility of picking up and moving out west. This city's Black population had dramatically and exponentially grown during the Civil War. They formed neighborhoods. The new communities were tightly packed and impoverished, and for many, it was a struggle to forge new post-slavery lives. There wasn't always enough to go around. Not enough paying work, not enough food, just not enough for everyone. After a while, many folks started moving away. There was some talk of Black people attempting to form a new territory in the western U.S. or Canada where they could be the majority population. Migration conventions were held to discuss these ideas as a large group. Nashville's was led by Robert Knowles, with Nelson Walker as secretary. And one leader, Randall Brown, said this, quote, "Let us go where we can grow lawyers, doctors, teachers, and other things, where we can be as good as anyone in society. My heart bleeds for my people. We have some 15,000 colored men in the vicinity, and God alone knows how they are all supported now and how they are to exist in the future. How long are we to be hewers of wood and drawers of water? Let us take a place in society. Thousands are crowding to the west, and in a short time, it will all be filled up. And then, where in the name of God are you going to?" In the next weeks, several more meetings were held, sometimes growing heated. Various suggestions of where they might move together were floated and knocked down as bad ideas. At the end of September, the group resolved to petition the federal government about suitable lands for resettlement of Southern freedmen. Black exodus remained a hot topic for decades. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Obviously, that group migration to establish a Black territory never happened, but something called the Great Migration did. In a less coordinated fashion, hundreds of thousands of Black people left the South to forge new lives in the rest of the country. They sought out better prospects in parts of the nation where sharecropping wasn't replacing slavery as a new way of tying families to the land through poverty, or where industrialization was thriving and there was a promise of factory work. A University of Washington project studying migrations in our nation has mapped out the patterns of where and when Black people moved from this region. Drawing on U.S. Census data, it shows that by the year 1900, there were about 9,000 Black residents of Illinois who were born in Tennessee. Another 7,000 from here had ended up in Missouri. Almost 4,000 were in Kansas, 3,700 in Indiana. 10 years later, the numbers in Illinois and Missouri had roughly doubled. That sure looks like folks who ended up in Chicago or Kansas City getting word back home that they'd found a good place to live, leading to more people coming to join them. Outmigration to Illinois picked up the pace again during the Great Depression. By 1940, there were 36,000 Black people from Tennessee living in Illinois, 48,000 in 1950. And remember, this doesn't include any kids those people had after they moved north. This is just people in Illinois who told the census at that time that they were born in Tennessee and who were recorded as being Black. Every big jump up in numbers comes from more folks moving. The thing that I don't think we tend to realize is that the Great Migration has slowed proportional to the overall population, but it still hasn't entirely stopped. It never stopped. In 1990, there were 54,000 Tennessee-born Black folks answering the census in Illinois, 37,000 in the year 2000. Now, moving to another state is not as big of a deal as it used to be. Many more people do it now for many more reasons. It's far simpler now to stay in touch with friends back home, to go back to see your folks for the holidays, that kind of thing. But these kinds of migrations do have major impacts on communities. They still change the personality of a place. These days, we tend to mostly talk about who is moving in to Middle Tennessee, how new groups from other parts of the nation or the world add a different flavor into the mix. Sometimes literally. The number of cuisines available to eat in this city that simply did not exist here during my childhood is too long to list. But it's the little things, too. Like the time the Chicago Cubs went to the World Series and suddenly there were W flags all over Nashville. That's how we realized how many of our neighbors had relocated from the Windy City. The way that California accents have become as common as Southern ones in Williamson County. Or the way the Mid-State surprised the world to embrace a professional hockey team and before long start throwing aquatic creatures on the ice because our area had become home to a lot of transplants from Detroit. It's Chinese grandparents walking their grandbabies to play at Dragon Park. It's the choir of kids singing in Kurdish at the annual Celebration of Cultures in Centennial Park. These things we notice. But what about the people who left? What flavor did they take with them? What holes were created by their leaving? Back when I was running our classical station, I loved playing the music of a composer named Clarence Cameron White, and I always pointed out that he was born in Clarksville in 1880. It's very cool to have some kind of connection to a person with such delightful creativity, and to someone who was such a great mentor and leader to other musicians of his era. But he was part of that great migration of Black folks. He thrived and added an incredible amount to the community around him, but it wasn't our community. Folks here didn't get to enjoy that. His family left when he was a child because this place didn't offer them enough. We did have the amazing Ida B. Wells here for a while. She attended Fisk here in Nashville, taught school in Memphis, and started her career as a truth-telling journalist right here in Tennessee, fighting against Jim Crow laws and lynch mobs. But by the 1890s, she was among those Black Southern folks in Chicago, seeking safety in the North from the violent response her work evoked in this area. Now, those are two people we know about. Out of tens of thousands, we don't. And sure, not everyone is a great cultural or political leader. But look at the music of Chicago and Kansas City, the blues and jazz that moved from the South to those cities. It's another indication of the cultural wealth and impact that traveled along with those financially impoverished masses. We'll never really know just what we've lost because large groups of people didn't feel they could make a living for themselves here. But when we look at the migrations that have found a destination in this place, we can see what added richness we'll lose if we stop being a safe and welcoming place for those groups. In just a few minutes, we hear about the debate raging around IVF in Tennessee. That's coming up after the newscast.
Best journalism in the nation. That's an apt description for a lot of what you hear on WPLN News. The proof this spring is in the array of journalism awards coming in. The Supermajority podcast won 3 national contests. Our investigative reporting, partnered with ProPublica, was named some of the best education coverage in the country. And for arts and culture, This Is Nashville and our music journalism are being honored on the national stage. We're proud, and you can be too.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. A Tennessee law that criminalizes housing immigrants without legal status could apply even if the person being housed has citizenship. Enforcement of the law relies on Immigration and Customs Enforcement making a determination about the person's status. WPLN's Miriam reports that's opened up a loophole in the law.
ICE does not make final or official decisions on a person's immigration status. That's for an immigration court to decide. In court, State Attorney Miranda Jones says that under the law, an arrest warrant or a notice of appearance from ICE counts as a determination, even if ICE's own investigation finds that the person was lawfully in the United States. Churches and landlords suing to block the law are concerned that they could also get swept up in enforcement if they provide shelter or rent a room to somebody without legal status. Their attorneys have asked the judge to temporarily stop enforcement of the law while the case goes through the courts. The state has asked the judge to leave the law as is because they don't want the public to think that the plaintiffs might succeed. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
A group of clergy in Memphis are working with an immigrant advocacy law firm to set up a court watch program. The idea is to have volunteers bear witness to the immigration court system and to offer a friendly face for those walking into an intimidating situation. They say the next step is getting the court's buy-in. Tennessee nonprofits say new restrictions are making it harder to help immigrant victims of crimes. Organizations serving victims of child abuse and domestic violence have long operated without asking about immigration status. But new grant requirements from federal and state agencies put funding for their programs at risk if they help undocumented people. This summer, the Department of Justice announced that recipients of grants to help crime victims must cooperate with immigration enforcement, including allowing them on site. It also says no federal dollars can go towards legal help for undocumented people. And last month, Tennessee officials warned against diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for grant recipients. The Tennessee Lookout reports these developments have made immigrants less likely to report crimes. Nonprofit Catholic Charities tells the outlet they'll continue serving immigrants regardless of the legal status, using non-public funding. For the first time since Tennessee adopted a new protocol for lethal injection, a post-execution autopsy has been released. WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney tells us it sheds some light on the amount of distress the death row inmate Byron Black showed during his execution.
The routine autopsy reveals that Byron Black developed pulmonary edema during the execution. That's a form of lung damage that can cause a painful drowning sensation. An NPR investigation found this happens more than 80% of the time in lethal injections nationwide. It's especially common with pentobarbital because that medication is highly caustic, like Drano. For weeks before he died, Black's attorneys argued that this form of execution violated his rights in several ways, one being the risk of this lung damage. The state's medical witness argued it was not likely to happen, especially before Black lost consciousness. He said it's typical to pass out within 20 seconds. In reality, Black groaned for several minutes and said it's hurting so bad as he died. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
Black's legal team says the autopsy failed to address other concerns. For example, his attorneys noted it took several attempts to find a vein, and it was possible the caustic medication was shot into the muscle instead. But the report did not discuss whether there was any damage at the injection site. Tennessee's Supreme Court has selected a new Chief Justice. Tennessee's high court judges vote among themselves to fill the leadership role. The Chief Justice serves in that position for a 3-year term. Jeff Bivens won this election by unanimous vote. It's his second time serving as Chief Justice. He's a graduate of East Tennessee State University and Vanderbilt University's law school. He has extensive experience as a circuit court judge and spent time on the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals. Republican Governor Bill Haslam appointed Bivens to the state Supreme Court in 2014. On the front lines of the overdose epidemic are people like police officers who end up developing relationships with those battling addiction. Our daily show, This is Nashville, has been diving deep into addiction all this week. This reflection comes from a Metro officer who discusses the emotional toll of losing the people he serves.
Occasionally, I would notice an alcohol smell coming from her, from Val. It was concerning, somebody so young and healthy and living in that situation in a homeless camp. She drank a lot, but everyone told me that she would do any kind of drugs that she could get her hands on. I kind of watched her mental and physical health decline, let's say, and the changes I would see in her from one time I would see her to the next. Like I would go a week, like sometimes like I'd see her and then I'd see her again in a week. And just the change in that amount of time was enough that it was a little startling. Maybe a year and a half, maybe this went on, and a call went out about a deceased person in the woods. So I go up to the campsite and there's Val laying on the dirt, face down, deceased. I couldn't help but remember how bubbly and sweet she was. She's not the last one. I've seen so many more since then. I did go to Val's funeral, and I've probably lost 40, about 40 people, mostly homeless, mostly overdoses. There's not a day goes by that I don't think about some of them.
That was a Metro police officer who was granted anonymity for this piece. The interview was produced by Tasha A.F. Lemley. You can call in today at noon to share your own stories of addiction, recovery, and loss. Music festivals come in many shapes and sizes. There are the big ones like Bonnaroo and Coachella that book the biggest artists in music. Then there are smaller, more targeted music festivals. Electric Forest in Michigan is specifically for EDM and jam bands. And then there's Big Ears in Knoxville. It just announced its lineup for next year. And reporter Justin Barney says Big Ears is for the weirdos.
Big Ears celebrates the avant-garde. You know how music festival posters all have big print for the big artists? The names in the big print for Big Ears next year are David Byrne, Laurie Anderson, Flying Lotus, Robert Plant, all incredible avant-garde indie artists who are relatively popular. And then there is John Zorn, a musician who most people have never heard of, known for doing hardcore punk covers of free jazz and occasionally using a duck call as an instrument, is in the big print and will be doing 12 performances in 2 days. There will be Ethiopian jazz, British funk, and many artists who intentionally defy categorization. There will also be contemporary indie rock musicians who skew artistic on the bill too, like MJ Lenderman, Perfume Genius, and S.G. Goodman.
Big Ears will happen in Knoxville from March 26th to 29th next year. Austin Peay State University achieved its highest enrollment numbers ever this year. The university now has over 11,000 students and shows an increase across different demographics and academic programs. Enrollment for the Clarksville-based university rose more than 7% from last year, despite a national decline in college enrollment. 32% of Austin Peay's student body is affiliated with the military. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Republican members of the Tennessee legislature have voted to protect human embryos. And now that abortion is outlawed in Tennessee, some have started questioning the process of in vitro fertilization, which often results in excess embryos that get discarded. On a recent episode of This is Nashville, host Blake Farmer talked to 3 women who've been through IVF and now must decide what to do with their remaining embryos. Kayla Davis has had 3 children through IVF with her husband, who has cystic fibrosis. Stephanie Paha and her wife Laura Lee have a 5-month-old and plan to try for more, but will still have several embryos left over.
Whenever we were going to start IVF, it was in the back of my mind about this from the beginning. We talked about it. I've thought about it a lot. And if we have extra, we will donate them to a family in need who needs health, because they're, healthy, viable, good embryos, with all the genetic testing done. So I could not just waste that there's so many people out there who would, die for that embryo. And I can't do that.
Yeah.
So
and you want to think, if they're going to that much trouble to go through this process and they would want to adopt an embryo, you have to believe that they're going to be really loving parents.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Though, of your children.
Yeah.
They're yours. I mean, they're genetically your kids. Yeah.
I know. I mean, that's going to be one lucky family.
Kayla, how about for you? Did you all have extras that you've had to decide what to do with?
Yeah, we did have some extras. We were very fortunate in the whole process. We haven't decided yet. We're going to wait until our kids get a little older. We're looking at all the different options. Do we donate them to a family in need? Do we donate them to science? Do we dispose of them? I've always kind of seen it as this is my analogy of making cookies. I don't know. And you have all the ingredients to make the cookie in a bowl, and you put it in the fridge, and you save it for later. And then when you're ready to make cookies, you put them in the oven, and then you get your cookie baby, right?
I was not expecting a cookie
analogy.
I know.
It's a very loose analogy. So obviously we poured so much love and time and pain and hope into those potential embryos. And we don't want to make that decision lightly. We might talk to some genetic counselors. We might, we'll pray about it. We might talk to a pastor about it. We're going to cross that road a little bit later when we feel settled and ready to do that.
Yeah. And something that didn't dawn on me until we were going through it, my wife and I, was that these are your full children, you and your husband. These are like they have brothers and sisters who will be walking around this planet if they go to someone else. What does that feel like to think, we could donate, but they would be our kids?
Yeah, it's wild. I've done some deep dives into this as we're kind of looking forward. There are Facebook groups and advocacy groups that are advocating for more of an open adoption. So the children that are born out of these donated embryos, they know that they have genetic siblings, and you have a relationship, kind of like a cousin-based relationship with them. There's a lot of different viewpoints on that. It's very interesting.
Because there's really no hiding with now that you've got genetic trees that you can just spit in a tube and figure out your DNA.
And you'd want to, I think it's just always better to have those conversations to say, we're not hiding anything. This is an incredible miracle of how you were created. And we're so grateful that you're here. And this is a part of your story. And we want to celebrate that part of your story, even though it doesn't look like everybody else's story. That's a huge commitment on our part to be willing to be that biological donor in that child's life forever. You always have access to us. If you ever want to ask about the color of your eyes, if you ever want to ask about, you're going to be a carrier for cystic fibrosis. So what is that going to look like down the line for you? We want to be that resource for them. We want to always look down the road and count the cost of what that would look like in our life before we make decisions like that. We want to really feel the weight of it.
I can see why you'd want to sit with that decision for a moment. Laura Lee, wrap us up here. How has going through IVF changed the way you think of fertility treatment? Has it?
Absolutely. I don't think that I thought too much about it in general before we went through it ourselves. And now I consider myself to be a huge advocate. And just we've connected with so many other couples who are going through the process too. And to me, it feels really special to have gone through it and to be able to be somebody who they can use as a resource and support. So, yeah, I went from being very indifferent to being very supportive about the whole process.
That's Laura Lee and Stephanie Paha, along with Kayla Davis, who appeared on This Is Nashville to discuss in vitro fertilization. This year, the Tennessee legislature became the first in the South to pass a law protecting IVF. The bill was sponsored by 2 Republican women, but it only passed because of Democratic support, with a majority of the Republicans voting no or not voting at all after an extended debate on the House floor. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter, too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/NashVillager. And thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.